we're going to have to remove this cover here, which is basically just to remove these screws here, and we'll take this cover off. I'm going to show you that. The coils are underneath that. Where it's going to be a little bit more difficult is down in the back over here, because these are the coils down here that we have to remove. This one, and this one, in order to get to the spark plugs. Now, I don't usually take this bar off here to get in there, but if you wanted to, you could, to give yourself a little bit more room. You just take out these screws here and here. Same thing on the other side. Unclip this here, and you can pull this bar out of here. It'll give you a little more room. But I'm going to do it without taking the bar out, because it's going to save me a little bit of time. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is we're going to push in on this clip right up in here. You can push it in with your finger, and you rock it, and you unplug the coil like that. Same thing on this one here. You push it in, you hear a click, and then you rock it back and forth, and you pull it off and just relocate it out of the way. Same thing on the last one down in here. Push in, and you rock it. Now believe me, it looks easy because I've done it a million times, but you're going to have a little bit of a problem taking these off here, because these clips do stick a little bit. You're just basically just pushing in that clip right there. You just push the clip in, and when you push the clip in, you can pull the coil right off of the car itself. Just a matter of, if you can't do it with your finger, you get in there with a screwdriver, but you push it, you can see how that piece pulls out, and it pops right off. So let me grab the wrench, the 10mm socket, and we're going to remove these coils. Fairly easy. You just put it on top here. Remember, counterclockwise is off, clockwise is on. You can, once you loosen them, you can pretty much do them by hand. So I just break them loose, and then just put your ratchet down, and you get in there and take the nut off by hand. Same thing on this one. You're going to need those nuts again, so don't drop them. If you drop them, it's going to be difficult to find them, so hold on. Alright, once you have the nuts off, you just take the coil and you rock it, and you pull it right out. It's got a fairly long extension on it. I always put the coils back in the position where they came out, but it's not imperative, you have to. Okay. Relocate these to the side for now. And same thing on the third one. This is a little more difficult because you've got the power steering in the way, but you can just maneuver it around it, and it comes right out. Alright, let me get a socket, and we're going to get in there. We're going to get the plugs out. This is where the spark plugs are. It's down inside these holes here where the coils were. So let me get a socket, and I'm going to get in there. I'm going to show you why it's a little bit easier with a longer extension. Now, you need something fairly long to get into this tube right here. Okay? So you have a little bit longer extension, and you get in there fairly easy. You just put your ratchet on it, and you loosen them up. Once you have them loose, you can pretty much take them out by hand. I want to just show you a problem that you may run into by I like using two extensions together like this because it's a little bit easier. I'm going to show you why. Now you unscrew the socket on the plug, you unscrew it all the way out, and when you take this out, see how it hits into the firewall here? It's a little bit difficult to make that turn to come out. If you had to, you could, if you use the two extensions instead. If you use two extensions and you're in here and you try to take it out and you can't get out far enough, at least you can separate one extension from the other like this in order to get it out. But that's personal preference. I mean, either way it'll work. Alright? Let me show you. Like this. And like that. Remember, it's counterclockwise to take them off, clockwise to put them on. Right, once you break it loose, once you have them loose, you can just turn them all the way out by hand. And now when you take it out, you'll see that your plug didn't come out. So what you would do is just take one of your coils, put your coil in through the hole like this, put it down, and pull it up. And your spark plug comes right out with it. Like that. Alright, we're going to do the same thing with the rest of them. That number 2 plug was probably held in by just one thread or so. Sometimes the plug will stick into the socket, sometimes it won't. So if it just stays in there, put the coil down on top of the plug, and you lift it up, and it comes right out. All right, now we'll do the third one, and we'll get that out. And the third one's a little bit tighter because you have your power steering hose in the way, but you can still get in like this. And again, once you break it loose, you can break it loose, take your ratchet off, and you turn it all the way out by hand. Once you've got it unscrewed all the way, you remove your socket. Remember what I said about if it's hitting in here and you can't get it out, just if you have 2 sockets, 2 extensions, you can separate them. All right, and take out the coil, stick it through the hole where the spark plug is, and you'll feel it attach, and you just pull it right out. If you have a magnet or whatever you have, you can use, but that's just a trick that I use all the time. So now the plugs that come out of here, they're what they call laser iridium plugs. So we're going to be using the same plugs. And as you can see, this one here appears to be fouled out. So let me grab the new plugs and we're going to throw them back in. And most of the time, the spark plug gap is set, and the reason I'm going to show you this is because when they ship them to you, they actually have a little tube over the top to keep the plug from actually being thrown around and banged and bending the electrode down. But check the electrodes anyway, just to make sure that they're gapped properly. So you can use a feeler gauge to check the gap on them. I already checked these, they're all okay. So we're going to be reinstalling them. Now when you put a plug back in, you don't want to drop the plug in the spark plug tube, and the reason you don't want to drop it in is because when this electrode hits something solid, you run the possibility of bending that down a little bit. So when you put the plug back in, you take the plug, you put it into the, I know it's a little bit difficult to see down there, make it light over a little better. Okay. When you put the spark plug in the spark plug tube, you put it in, you run it down as far as you can with your finger, and you just drop it that last little bit. All right, same thing with the second plug. Put your finger on it, bring it down, and you drop it in. And we're going to do the same thing with the last plug. I'm going to put that in as well. Slide your finger down and let it go down the last one. Now, when you screw a plug back in, you do not tighten it with the ratchet. You screw everything in by hand, as far in as you possibly can by hand. Right, you'll know when you're tight because you'll feel it get to a point where it just doesn't go any further by hand, and then you're going to need a ratchet. So tighten it in all the way, and then I come over and do the same thing on the next plug. And the same thing on the last plug right there. You see what I'm telling you about the it touches up against. It's a little difficult sometimes. All right, tighten that in all the way by hand also. All right, fairly tight there. Now we're going to get in there with our ratchet, and we'll tighten it up with the ratchet. Once you feel it touch into it, you just go about a quarter of a turn more. Now, there is torque specs on this, but there is torque specs. Tighten it down, and then we're going to go and tighten up the other three, and we'll get this coils back on, and we'll be all set. Nice and tight. And then we're going to go to our last plug. Little difficult with one hand, so sorry about the slow process here. And tighten that last one up right there. All our plugs are now tight. Now remember, if you had this bar out of the way, it gives you a little bit more accessibility, but it also takes you a little bit more time. And all right, next thing we do is I put our coils back in, and you put them in and you turn it, and you line it up, and you drop it right in. Same thing here, over the top of that bolt. And I did tell you about number 3 coil was misfiring, so number 3 plug was misfiring, so I am changing a coil on number 3 cylinder. And in this particular case, number 3 is the last one. This is a J-code engine, so it is the last one. Usually it's this one here, but in this case it is the last one right there. All right, screw the nuts back onto the coil hold down, screw them down by hand. Same thing with the other ones. And then we can tighten them down with, okay, make sure all your coils are tight. And they don't have to be super tight, just snug them down because it's just holding the coils in place. I probably told you that before, but I'll tell you again. Alright, that's that. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to reattach each one of the coil plugs. And when you put the plugs on, you should hear it snap in. Listen, and you'll hear it snap right in. So that way you know it's locked in and it's not going to vibrate off. Same thing here. And the last one, like that. Alright, so our back plugs are done. Now we're going to move up to the front, and we're going to take care of the front plugs now next. We're going to change the front plugs. It's pretty easy with the plugs in the front because there's a lot more room. You just take and turn this way, and you turn this way, and this locks the cover on. You can take this cover off, and just relocate it off to the side for now. And then we're going to do the same thing we did in the back. We're going to push these little pins right here in. Sometimes they're pretty tight. Sometimes they're a little tight. So what you got to do is get in here with the screwdriver and you push it in this way. And if that doesn't work, you're going to push this in with your thumb, like that. And then you're going to go underneath here with the screwdriver, right underneath here, and give it a little bit of a twist at the same time. It'll come right off. Now I'm going to put the camera here for 1 second. I wish I could show you, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. And then it just comes right off like that. Same thing on this one here. That one came off. I heard a click. Same thing here. Give it a push, and you can hear it pop off. No, it's not doing it either. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to push in with it, and then we're just going to pry on it with the screwdriver, and that comes right off too. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the coils like we did in the back. Break it loose, break it loose. Right? And once you have them loose, you remove it by hand. Don't drop the nut. You're going to need to put it back on. All right. Then you're going to take your coils out of the car. You just pull them up, and you pull them right out. I always put the coils back in the same places. I told you that already, but that's personal preference. Right? And now we're going to get in here. As you can see, these are a lot more accessible than the ones in the back. So in the front, you got a lot more room, so you can just get in here with the ratchet fairly easy. I'm going to trade hands. Normally you want to do this with 2 hands, but I'm just, same thing here. And here. All right. Then you can just drop that in there, and you can turn it out all the way by hand. Same thing on this one. Then remember the trick I showed you with the coil. You push the coil in, and you pull the plug right out. Again, you can use any means you have. You can use a magnet, you can use the spark plug socket, whatever. All right, it comes right out. Same thing here. Pull it right out. Now, the reason I lay these as the cylinder comes out is I always look at the plug to see if it's burning nice and cleanly. And in this case, these are burning very nicely. Same thing here, very nicely. The only one that was a problem was the one that was this one here that was not burning correctly. That was most likely a defective coil too. So we are going to change the coil at the same time because it did have a random misfire in number 3 cylinder. So we're going to be changing this this plug obviously, and we're going to change that coil pack on top also. So let me grab the new plugs and we'll get this back together. Okay, just as in the back plugs, we're going to be putting the plugs in the front too. We're going to check the gap in the plugs to make sure they're okay. And then remember what I told you in the back is we're not going to drop the plugs in. We're going to put them in gently. Put your finger on the plug, lower it down, and let it slide in. Same thing here. Each one of them, you just let it slide down so it doesn't fall in. You don't want it to bang like this and then close the gap up. All right, once you've got them in there, again, you screw it in strictly with the extension by hand. You don't tighten it in with a ratchet yet. Screw it in as tight as you can by hand. Don't do it with one hand. I've done it a million times, so I know what I'm doing. You want to actually hold the ratchet here and tighten it at the same time, right? Because otherwise you have the possibility of snapping off the spark plug. You don't want to do that. Right? And you go across all three of them, and you do the same thing. You can feel when it's tightened almost all the way down. Now there is torque specs on this. There is a torque spec to put these plugs in. Alright, and once you get them screwed down all the way, you just go a little bit more, and you're all set. Now, we're going to put the coils back on, and we're going to put them back into the same position that they came out. Put the coil down, put it over the top of the bolt right there. Same thing on this one. Push it down, and the last one, push it down. Screw the nuts on top. Remember, by hand all the way down. Same thing here. And the last one. Be careful, don't drop them. You'll never find them again. And then you just tighten them up. These are just, they don't have to be real tight. It's just snug to hold the coils in. Right? Then you're going to push your coil plugs back on, and you're going to listen for that click. You got to hear it click back on because you don't want it to come off by accident while you're driving. Right? Each one is nice and tight, so we know we're good. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put that cover back on that we previously took off. Remember, these screws on top here, they're not really screwed to be tight, they're just lock pins that hold it in place, and you'll feel it lock in. Alright, so now we have those done. Now we're going to go inside the car, we're going to start it up, and if you did your job correctly, you should have no misfires, no rocking and rolling in the engine. You should run nice and smooth. So let's get around there. We're going to fire this sucker up. Alright, this will be the test to make sure. That's it. Now you can't feel it obviously, but I can feel it. Like the engine is running nice and smooth. No misfires. Everything feels nice. That's it. Alright, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.